Detective recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a crime mystery film called The Whole Truth. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Defense attorney Richard Ramsey recalls the day of his client Mike Lassiter's trial where the 17-year-old boy was accused of killing his father, Boone Lassiter. The court officer smiled at him, and Richard remembers thinking that he was in a world of trouble. Aside from leaving his handprint on the murder weapon, Mike himself confessed to his father's murder. Richard mentions that half of his previous cases had evidence that was just as bad as Mike's, but he still managed to get them a lower sentence by pleading them out. Unfortunately, Richard's having a tough time dealing with Mike's case because he has known the kid all his life. Mike was supposed to go to college, maybe even law school, and Richard doubted that his mother could survive him going to jail. However, since Richard knew Mike's father and everything going on in the Lassiter household, he is still confident that Mike has a defense if he would just talk to him. During the trial, Mike's mother Loretta watches from the back as the jury enters the courtroom. Judge Robichaud reminds the jury that the defendant is still a minor, but due to the seriousness of his case, Mike's case has been transferred to them, the Judicial District Court of the state of Louisiana. In there, Mike will be tried as an adult for first-degree murder. LeBlanc, the prosecutor, makes his opening statement by saying that this is a simple case of patricide. He says that Mike is a senior at Newman, a good student, and the debate team captain. LeBlanc then announces that Mike killed his father not by accident nor self-defense, but in anger. It was a premeditated murder with malicious intent, and that he'll prove it without a reasonable doubt. The prosecutor adds that while Boone Lassiter wasn't a good father to Mike, he wasn't the worst, either. Concluding his statement, LeBlanc asks the jury to return a guilty verdict to the murder of first degree. Meanwhile, Richard whispers to Mike that he has to waive his opening statement since Mike isn't talking. With no other choice, Richard tells the court that he is reserving his right to an opening statement until after the prosecution presents its case. The judge allows it, then asks the prosecution to present its first witness. LeBlanc calls on a flight attendant for a private airline named Angela Morley. When asked if she's always on Boone's flights, she replies that she was on most of them since Boone would always request her. LeBlanc asks when Boone last flew with her, and Angela says that it was on the last week of January, to LA and back with Mike, then round trip to Dallas. She says the purpose of their Dallas trip was business, while their LA trip was to take Mike to look for colleges like UCLA and Stanford. Angela adds that they were supposed to go to Oregon, but the father and son had decided to come home instead. In a flashback, Boone tells his son that Stanford is one of the top schools in the country. Since Mike has already gotten in early, he suggests that they don't have to go to Reed anymore. When it's time for Richard to cross-examine Angela, he tells her that he's never been on a private plane before, so he asks if clients can bring whoever they want and if Boone would do that, to which she replies yes. Richard asks Angela if Boone was a good client, and Angela affirms this, saying that Boone was professional but fun and pleasant to be around. Finally, Richard asks the witness if she ever left the names of the women Boone had brought on the plane off the manifest. LeBlanc objects to Richard's question, and the judge tells the two lawyers to come forward. He asks Richard if he has evidence for the court. Richard replies no, and while the judge is talking to them, Angela recalls one instance when Boone had brought women on the plane. She finally answers Richard's question, stating that it would be against the law to omit passengers from the manifest and firmly denies ever doing that. Boone's driver takes the stand next, and LeBlanc asks him if he picked up Boone and Mike at the lakefront airport. He says he did, at around 4 o'clock. The driver states that he drove Boone again straight to the airport the following morning at 7 o'clock. LeBlanc asks if there's anything unusual that day, but the driver says no, even though a flashback reveals that they picked up a woman along the way. After that, Richard stands and questions the driver if he has ever picked up women for Boone on the way to the airport, and LeBlanc immediately objects. Richard withdraws his statement, and the judge tells him to sit down. Richard does so, then tells Mike that's what losing looks like and that it's the best he could do until Mike starts talking to him. After their session in court, Richard recalls how Boone used to sleep with anyone. It's not related to the case, but Richard thinks it could make him look bad. He also believes that Loretta knows about it but doesn't care as long as it helps her son. On his way out of the court, Richard is greeted by Janelle Brady, but Richard tells her that she's late before completely ignoring her. Richard talks to his colleague, Jack Legrand, about one of the jury members before introducing Janelle as Walter Brady's daughter. Richard asked Walter to sit second chair with him, but since Walter couldn't, he sent Janelle instead. Richard continues to talk about the jury, clearly disappointed about Janelle's tardiness. Jack leaves and the two make their way to the attorney's conference room. Inside, Richard interviews Janelle and asks her to tell him more about herself. To test Janelle, he questions her about which witness she believes lied on the stand that morning. Janelle thinks that Angela lied about the passenger manifest because she looked at her hands after answering Richard's question. With this, Janelle deduces that Boone must have taken different women on his flights. Richard agrees, adding that Angela didn't want to lose her next job by admitting as much. He asks who else lied, and Janelle says that the limo driver went out of his way to say he drove straight to the airport, so they must have stopped to pick up a woman. Finally, Richard asks Janelle what she thinks he lied about in court. Smiling, Janelle replies that Richard has lied about not being on a private plane before. Satisfied with Janelle's answers, Richard tells her that she has probably heard that Mike isn't speaking to anyone, including him. That means that Richard is defending Mike without knowing all the facts and that he's only learning everything as they go. In their next session, Richard introduces Janelle to court, and the judge is surprised to learn that she's related to Walter Brady. Next on the stand is the officer who responded to the Lassiter's domestic violence call with a possibility of homicide. She testifies that she wasn't sure whether to enter their residence or wait for backup. But since she was told that it was already under control, she went in. In a flashback, Loretta greets the officer, then leads her to the master's bedroom, where Mike is sitting beside his father's dead body on the floor. LeBlanc asks the officer what she did upon seeing Boone, and the officer replies that she made sure to confirm Boone's death by checking his pulse. Upon confirmation, Richard arrived at the Lassiter residence. When Loretta leaves the room, Mike says that he should have done that a long time ago. To clarify, LeBlanc asks the officer to repeat what exactly Mike said, and the officer replies, "I should have done this a long time ago." Richard objects, saying that what the officer just said is different from her previous sworn statement, saying, "should have done this a long time ago," and not, "I should have." Richard argues that without the correct pronoun, Mike could have meant, "someone should have done this a long time ago," suggesting that someone else did it. LeBlanc asks the officer to clarify her statement, and the officer insists that she's sure that Mike said, "I should have done this a long time ago." In another flashback, Richard enters the master's bedroom with Loretta, then looks at Mike and Boone's body in disbelief. Back in the courtroom, the officer is asked about how long it took for the other officers to arrive, to which she responds with only a couple of minutes. In another recollection, the officer is telling Richard that she needs Mike to step away from the body. Loretta talks to a disoriented Mike and tells him that they need to leave so the police could do their work. Mike goes, but Loretta and Richard remain there on the officer's orders. Since Richard has no questions for the responding officer, the judge declares recess, and Richard tells Mike that they will lose unless Mike starts talking to him. As Mike is being taken away, Janelle asks Richard why Mike isn't talking to him, to which he replies that Mike never said why. During recess, Richard introduces Janelle to Loretta. Feeling bad, Loretta asks if she can see her son, so he tells her where she can find Mike. Before going their separate ways, Richard gives Janelle the key card to a room at the Marina Hotel, where he keeps all the evidence and reports they need for the case. The next witness is one of the Lassiters' neighbors for 15 years, Arthur Weston. He testifies that he liked Boone and that his son was Mike's classmate at Newman. He says Mike and Boone were very close and that Loretta was sort of the odd woman out. He adds that Mike wanted to be a lawyer like his father and that when Mike was 12 years old, he wanted to go to a forensic camp. While Arthur is testifying, Mike sits in his chair while drawing something on a piece of paper. Arthur continues to recount that one day, someone had poisoned their neighbor's cat and Mike was able to find out who the culprit is. LeBlanc asks if the bond between the father and son continued until Boone's death, and Arthur says that something must have happened 8 months ago before Boone died. In the next flashback, there's a party at the Lassiter residence with Arthur and Richard both in attendance. Boone gets drunk and starts humiliating Loretta in front of the guests. Nobody did anything until Mike stepped in, telling his father to stop. However, Arthur claims that he spoke up and tried to stop Boone. What really happened was that Richard spoke with Boone to calm him down. He claimed to be fine, but as soon as Richard left, Boone grabbed his son and spoke to him. Arthur says he isn't sure what Mike and Boone were talking about, but he saw the effect it had on Mike. After talking to his son, Boone spoke to Arthur, telling him that it's none of his business. He even threatened to kill him if Arthur looked at him that way again. Once again, Richard has no questions for the witness, and Mike continues with his drawing. The trial continues, and Detective Graves is called to the stand. He reports that in cases involving married couples, the spouse is always the first suspect. The responding officer told him about what Mike said when he arrived at the scene. He says that he took a look at the knife as it stuck out of Boone's chest, and the size of the palm print he found in it changed his focus. Detective Graves tells LeBlanc that they took Mike and Loretta to the station for questioning, where the two kept quiet. When it's Richard's turn, he asks Detective Graves why he didn't pursue any suspects other than Mike, and the detective replies that he believes Mike did it. As the trial goes on, more evidence is presented to the court, including Boone's bloody shirt and pictures from the crime scene. The crime technician who examined Boone's body explains the cause of death and that he died in under a minute. He also adds that he believes Boone knew his assailant and was taken by surprise since he had no scratches and bruises, as pointed out by Richard. Richard then asks him if there was any hair found on the victim, and the crime technician says that the hair strands found were of Loretta, Mike, and all the other people who worked at the scene post-mortem. Contrary to his statement, a flashback shows him talking to another crime technician about Loretta. She claimed to be in the shower washing her hair at the time of the murder. They then talked about how they found a couple of hair strands in the sink and only one strand in the shower. To make things clear, Richard asks the witness if there is nothing at all that might point to a suspect other than Mike, and the witness says yes. Arthur's son Alexander takes the stand next, and before he started testifying, another flashback shows him watching Loretta through a window as she takes a shower. Then, as he makes a statement, he recalls seeing Boone sexually assault his wife in their home. When Richard asks if he saw Boone behaving brutally toward Loretta, he lies, saying that he didn't. It's Loretta's turn to take the stand and she describes the day of the murder. Mike was supposed to be at soccer practice and she was working out in their gym from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. Loretta says she was expecting Boone to come home but she wasn't sure when he will arrive since he always texted her before landing. Loretta adds that she didn't hear him coming into the house because she was getting in the shower. When she came out of the shower, she saw Mike in the doorway, asking her if his father was dead, and she confirmed it. After that, she says that Mike's next words were, "I did it." Richard questions Loretta next, and she tells everyone how she has endured physical and emotional abuse from her husband with their son as a witness to everything. She also adds that Boone hurt her the day he died. Richard presents reports and photographs of Loretta's injuries taken a day after her husband's death. After receiving a note, Richard visits Mike and tells him that he's not taking the stand. Despite Richard's protests, Mike still refuses to talk to him. After learning about it, Loretta confronts Richard, but he tells her that he can't keep Mike from testifying since it's his constitutional right. When it's Mike's turn at the stand, he tells everyone how his father would verbally abuse his mother. While he didn't witness any physical abuse, he definitely heard some of it, from the sound of a hand hitting the flesh to Loretta's loud cries. When asked if he went home early on the day of the murder because soccer practice was cancelled, Mike says yes and adds that he heard Loretta and Boone in the bedroom. Richard is about to ask him another question, but Mike cuts him off, saying that he killed his father so he wouldn't be able to force himself on him anymore, especially after Boone touched him again during their trip. The room gets quiet as Mike tells his story, and he continues to say that it all started when he was 12 years old. Richard asks him where the flight attendant was during the incident, and Mike says he doesn't know before confessing that he hasn't told anyone about it out of shame. After Richard, LeBlanc asks Mike what Boone was doing when he went to his bedroom on the day of the murder. Mike says Boone was about to unpack, and when LeBlanc asks if Boone had threatened him, Mike says his father told him to be ready since they'll be doing it again before Mike went off to college. After the session, Richard learns that LeBlanc will recall Angela Morley. Angela takes the stand one more time, but instead of Richard, Janelle is the one cross-examining her. Before Janelle questions Angela, Mike whispers to ask Angela about Ginsburg. Under pressure from Janelle's questioning, it is revealed that Angela is in a personal relationship with the co-pilot. She's been spending some time in the cockpit, long enough that she might have missed something unusual happening between Boone and Mike. Later on, Janelle talks to Loretta and suspects that Mike must be protecting her, which is confirmed in a flashback that shows Loretta saying Boone's death was her mistake while Mike tries to take the blame. Janelle confronts Richard, and after realizing that Richard knows that everything that Mike said was a lie, and that he was just protecting his mother, she gets mad and leaves. Though there isn't enough evidence to support Boone's abuse, Mike gets acquitted. As the verdict is being read, Mike recalls the day of the murder, how he touched his father's body and blood, making sure to leave his handprint on the knife. After the trial, Mike asks Richard to meet him, and that's when he shows Richard his drawing. Mike says it's Richard's watch left on the rug. He reveals that he knows Richard was the one who killed his father. Another flashback shows Mike seeing Loretta picking up the watch. Richard denies it, and even though Mike threatens to tell the DA everything, Richard remains in denial. After his confrontation with Mike, Richard recalls what really happened on the day of the murder when he killed Boone. He and Loretta are having an affair, and after Boone learned about it, Richard advised him to divorce her. However, Boone has hinted that he will kill Loretta, and Richard remembers Loretta's story about how Boone threatened to kill her. In this flashback, Loretta is shown to repeatedly hit herself with a heavy object to support her claims of physical abuse. It also shows Richard himself stabbing Boone. He instructs her to touch the knife, and just as she's about to, Mike returns home. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.